I want to go backwards here. This is the last slide that we looked at last week, and there's really uh, timely advice here. I thought it wouldn't hurt anything to go over real quickly once again. Do not hasten in your spirit to be angry. You know any angry people? Have you have you seen any videos on internet of uh, I used to be a very angry person, drove like an idiot. I was one of those that you all shake your fist at kind of thing at. Uh, anyway, it was because I didn't have God buried in my heart like I didn't have my heart open to him as like it should have been. And I think that's one of the reasons where anger comes from is not having a connection with God. You know something's missing, and it's frustrating. You don't know what it is, and just anger just comes out. Another thing that brings anger out is guilt. We mask guilt a lot of times by getting angry, and so. Um, but anyway, he says basically you don't want to be angry. You don't want to be an angry person. That anger rests in the bosom of fools. It's, it's you don't have to be angry. You don't have to be stupid. But if you're angry all the time, it's because you're a fool, essentially. And so we just need to keep in mind about our anger. Jesus said, "Be angry and sin not." So it's not like we're never going to get angry, but there's righteous anger and there's just anger. And so we need to be real careful about that. Verse 10 says, "Why were the former days better than these?" Don't say that, for you do not wisely inquire concerning this. It's not wise. It doesn't do you any good to think about why, even if they really were better than these days, it doesn't matter. You can't change anything. You live now, not in the past. And so you're not wise if you just dwell on the past and wish you could live in the good old days kind of thing. Um, I'm just going to skip. Uh, I'm just going to skip the rest of it. We talked about those are the two things that I really wanted to hit. Did anybody have any comments you want to make about any of what we just talked about, or the rest of this, Gene?
Stop and think about it. The good old days weren't all good.
Yeah.
Probably exactly just like they do now.
Yeah, I've heard somebody say the good old bad old days.
Good, it's bad.
Well, that's just it. We have selective memory, and you don't want to remember the bad stuff. So you just automatically file the bad stuff as far back as you can get it in your brain, and the good stuff, leave it stand out because you can bask in that. But
You remember the bad stuff all the time, you're just gonna be angry.
right, yeah, yeah, and not just angry, but many times angry with God because uh, why is all this stuff happening to me? Gene, did you have another thing?
Just the nation. Now, when Jesus drove the money changers out of the temple, was he angry?
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. That's why I said, yeah, I mean that's righteous indignation. There's a reason. God got angry many times. You read the Old Testament and you go, whoa, man, he got mad at his own people so many times. Well, yeah, enough to cause a flood and enough to have Jerusalem destroyed completely twice in the course of history, and attacked many other times. The children of Israel, God's chosen people, made him angry by chasing after other idols. or chasing after idols and other gods who really are no gods. So there's a place for anger, but it's not something that you want to strive for or hasten after, hurry up so you can get angry. No, that's not a good idea. Okay, so we'll skip ahead now to uh, I, I was thinking about Solomon writing uh, this book of Ecclesiastes, and it's all about wisdom. I was thinking to find out by wisdom what life is all about, so to speak. It made me think about the first chapter of Proverbs. It's written by the same guy. And last week I mentioned that Ecclesiastes was probably written primarily to the same guy as this, although just like the Proverbs apply to all of us, Ecclesiastes applies to all of us as well. But just listen to this, the very first words from the book of Proverbs. The Proverbs of Solomon, the son of David, king of Israel, to know wisdom and instruction. Isn't that exactly what Ecclesiastes is about? To perceive the words of understanding, to receive the instruction of wisdom, justice, judgment, and equity, to give prudence to the simple, to the young man knowledge and discretion. A wise man will hear and increase in learning, and a man of understanding will attain wise counsel. These are the same principles that we're learning in the book of Ecclesiastes. Let's get down a couple verses in Proverbs chapter 1. He says, verse 8, my son, hear the instruction of your father. So he's writing to Rehoboam, trying to educate him in life, how to be wise. And there's a lot of things in the book of Proverbs and in the book of Ecclesiastes that Rehoboam never got. And he didn't act wisely. So Solomon did everything he could to raise up a child to go right, but yet Rehoboam didn't. And he's the wisest man in the world. So what makes us think that if our kids don't grow up like we want them to, that it's our fault? It might be our fault, but if we're doing the best that we can, even the wisest man in the world could raise a child that didn't follow after God. So I find a little comfort in that, at least. We all just have to do the best that we can. But I just wanted to, it just struck me the comparison of the book of Ecclesiastes and the book of Proverbs. Proverbs goes about it in a different way, but the whole idea is, son, I want you to learn about wisdom and instruction, and I want you to learn to love it. Okay, so with that out of the way, we go on in Ecclesiastes. Ecclesiastes chapter 7, verse 13. He says, consider the work of God, for who can make straight what he has made crooked? So what does consider mean? Okay, exactly. Think about it. Meditate on it. It's like there's hearing and then there's hearing. There's thinking and then there's thinking. He's saying, give it some thought. But he says, think about God's work. Can you undo something God's done? God made a branch crooked. Can you make it straight? No. So anything that God has done, you ought to pay attention to it, because God does it. You can't alter it. You can try, but you will fail every time. So you need to think about what God's work is. And I put over on the side there, stay in your own lane. God has his work. We have our business.
That's where I learned, stay in your own lane. Like,
Yeah.
don't try and do his recovery, do your own.
Yeah.
I'm finding out that NA is teaching us a lot about God and following God.
Yeah.
But they don't say it that way.
Right. Well, the original guys that started it all believed in God, and God was the higher power.
People also.
Yeah. Yeah, so, you know, think about God's work, what he does and what he wants for us. We can't make straight what he's made crooked. So stay in your own lane. In other words, you're not God. Verse 14 says, in the day of prosperity, and that word prosperity means in the good and pleasant times. In the day of the good and pleasant times, be joyful. But in the day of adversity, which is the opposite, the bad or unpleasant times, in the day of bad or unpleasant times, consider. Here's that word consider again. Take some time to think about it. Surely God has appointed the one as well as the other. So if God has appointed both of them, what does that tell you about each one of them? All right. There is a place for each one of them. God created that. He appointed the one as well as the other. So we need to think about it. Barbara?
Think if we had all good and not had any adversity, I think we would quit believing in God. And I think because we need God through those difficult times.
Yes. Well, part of what you missed while you were down in Arizona was, he says it's better to go to the house of mourning than the house of mirth, and said that a couple times in these first 6 chapters, and the reason why is because for people will give consideration, will think about it, and so yeah, without winter, would you really appreciate the summer? And there's always good and bad, but you really need both. That's how God made it. Gene?
I think another scripture we saw is not a man that walketh, but he should direct his steps.
Okay, and that one certainly would apply to verse 13 there. You know, we have no business trying to straighten out something that we think God made wrong. We better think about why God did it that way and consider the work of God. So there is a reason. There's a time and a place. Well, to everything, there's a season and a time for every purpose under heaven. There's a time to be happy. There's a time to be sad. There's a time for pleasure. There's a time for adversity. We need to know how to negotiate that in our lives. He says, here's why. He says, so that man can find out nothing that will come after him. God's the one that appointed it. Man can't know anything that's going to come after him. We need to think about God's work. God has it in the palm of his hand. God is in control. Man cannot find out anything that's going to come after him. So just think about it and let it affect your life. Don't try to control everything. That's another area that I've labored against sometimes, is trying to be in control of everything. You can't control everything. And as soon as you realize that, you realize it's in God's hands, what do? You give it to God, and what does that do for you? Takes the burden away from you. It lets you find peace, lets you relax in this life. And so there's a lot of reasons why we need to think about where God fits into the picture. Notice he started bringing God into this more. The ultimate conclusion that he's coming to is to fear God and keep his commandments. That's the whole of man. That's what we're going to see in the last chapter, chapter 12, I believe. And so he's been talking about life under the sun. Just living this life. If you just try to live the life, it's all vain. You don't take anything out that uh, you didn't bring in. You came in with nothing, you're going out with nothing. So everything in between, does it matter really? Not in one sense, but he's starting to bring in, you need to think about God as you proceed through life because God is in control. He's the one that's appointed both the good stuff and the bad stuff. Um, as I put over in pink there, both adversity and prosperity are part of God's design. We don't know what will happen next, so give it some thought. Think about uh, what attitude you need to have to carry on to the next moment of your life, to the next day, the next week, the next month. Think about that. Think about your place and think about God's place. Verse 15 says, I have seen everything in my days of vanity. How would we put it? I've seen it all. You know, there's not, you know, how many times have people said, I thought I had seen it all, but I haven't. You know, something new pops up. But he's saying, I've seen it all. And if there was ever anybody that had the opportunity to see it all, it would be Solomon, because he had wealth beyond measure and God's blessing. And pardon? He had a few wives and concubines, like 1,000 of them. So yeah, he literally could say, I've seen it all when it comes to how women behave, you know, how I might interact with all different kinds of women or whatever. But he's seen it all. He's had people coming from every part of the world wanting to get his wisdom. And when they do, what do you think they're doing? They're asking hard questions. They're asking about the troubles they've had in their life and uh, trying to get advice. I would hate to be a psychiatrist to have to listen to all that garbage, you know, that people have to get out in order to get healthy mentally. And so he was kind of like that with a lot of people. His wisdom went throughout the world, and so people came. I want you to tell me the answers to some of this stuff. And so yeah, I have seen everything in my days of vanity. You know, when it all said and done, all the advice I give, one generation from now, is it going to mean anything? No. Everybody that I gave advice to is going to be gone, just like I'm going to be gone. So in that sense, it's vanity. All this that I've done, everything I've seen is vanity. There is a just man who perishes in his righteousness, and there's a wicked man who prolongs his life in his wickedness. Does that make sense? You think, why is this guy prospering so much? He doesn't care about God. In fact, he curses God and all this, and yet he's the one with $50 million in the bank. Why is that? And on the other hand, you see, that is one of the most righteous people I've ever seen. And yet they get cancer, or, you know, somebody steals everything that they have, or their house burns down. I think, why does that stuff happen? Well, bottom line is, like I said in blue, life on earth is not always fair. And that's one of the things that we have to get used to. Life is not always fair. Gene?
We have a song that illustrates that farther along, we'll know all about it.
Yeah. Yeah. That song was sung at all the funerals of my family, my father, my mother, my sisters. But I'm not sure we will know all about it farther along. There may be things that we never, and it probably won't matter. Anything that we don't learn farther along will not matter when we get to that place. So, but it is it's a comforting thing to know that down the road, you'll understand stuff. And we do, we find that, I don't know why this happens, when I'm a teenager, but when I get to be an adult, oh yeah, I can see why. I understand why my parents were so strict or whatever, now that I've got kids of my own kind of thing. So anyway, bottom line is, just because you're a righteous, just person doesn't mean that bad things are not going to happen. And a wicked person doesn't mean that they're always going to suffer from it. Sometimes they get away with it, for lack of any better term. That's the way life is under the sun. It's not fair. Don't like it, but it's not fair. So he says, verse 16, do not be overly righteous, nor be overly wise. Why should you destroy yourself? It took me a while thinking about that. Why would being wise destroy you? Well, I put it in blue. What I came to the conclusion of is, what he's saying is, don't be so righteous. Try to be so wise. You'll tear yourself up trying to make sense of the course of life. You'll destroy yourself if you try to figure it all out. He tried to figure it out, and whether that had anything to do with his later mess ups that he did, but just trying to be a know-it-all, or thinking that you're so wise, you can tear yourself up trying to figure out what happened or what's going on in this life. And so then now he says, verse 17, do not be overly wicked, nor be foolish. Why should you die before your time? I think we all can understand how that happens. But I thought at first, why would he say, do not be overly wicked? Why doesn't he just say, don't be wicked? Well, you can be overly wicked, but isn't being wicked bad too? Why would you specify overly wicked? That's interesting, because we've already seen in Ecclesiastes, we've already seen how, well, actually we haven't already seen it. It's at the bottom of the page here. Let's just read it in verse 20. There is not a just man on earth who does good and does not sin. So we're all going to be wicked from time to time. And when I say wicked, that doesn't mean Adolf Hitler or, the worst person that ever lived. It just means bad, doing something wrong. So he's saying, I understand that there will be those times when we mess up, but don't be overly wicked, nor be foolish. And why? Why should you die before your time? Why would you die before your time if you were overly wicked? You might get hung or electrocuted or uh, shot, or somebody uh, finds you in an alley and beats your head in with a baseball bat, or because you're not acting like you're supposed to. You're somebody that selling drugs, for example, being overly wicked, hurting a lot of people by selling that stuff to them and everything. Eventually somebody's going to get mad, or you're going to lose your money somehow, and then the people that you owe money to are going to come after you. That's what overly wickedness gets you. It shortens your time. What is the first commandment with promise? Children, obey your parents. And that's because it'll lengthen your days. This is exactly the same kind of thing. Uh, yeah, living righteously will extend your time on this earth, or at least it won't shorten it like living wickedly can do. And Sue?
You're usually with people that
are wicked, you're just setting yourself up for either dying early or being overly wicked to them because they've been wicked to you. I mean, it's kind of a catch-22. Once you're in that, it's hard to get out. Once you're out, you'll see, oh my goodness, what did I get myself into?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of ways that being wicked can shorten our lives. Abusing ourselves with overindulgence of anything from, from drugs to sex to food, just eating food and stuff. That all can shorten our lives. And so this is just good sage advice from Solomon. Why do you want to die before your time? Don't you want to live as long as you can here? So don't be overly wicked. Then he says in verse 18, it's good that you grasp this and also not remove your hand from the other. It took me a while to figure out what this was and what the other was. I think what it is and the first part of verse 16 saying don't be overly righteous or overly wise. That's the other. The this is don't be overly wicked. And don't be overly good. It's good that you grasp this don't be overly wicked thing, but also don't remove your hand from the other. Don't be overly wise or righteous. For he who fears God will escape them all. What happens to the overly righteous? They'll destroy themselves. What happens to the wicked? They will die before their time. But he who fears God, what will happen? He'll escape it all. He won't destroy himself and he won't die before his time, at least from the wickedness. So that's why he's saying, think about this, think about your relationship with God, think about it. And he says here, this is really the conclusion he's driving after down the line. He's introducing it to us now. Here's why it's good to consider these things, because he who fears God will escape them all. Isn't that what we're looking for in this life? To not be destroyed, to not destroy ourselves. We want to live our life to enjoy it and live a long time, that kind of thing. The answer is to fear God. And how does that get you to escape untimely death due to wickedness and being overly wise? Pardon? Okay, but in this life, if I look to God as my higher power and I let him into my heart and God, I want you to control my life, what's going to happen? You're going to live wise. Everything that God tells us to do, is that good for us or bad for us? It's good for us. So if we really respect God and revere him and fear him, we'll do what he says, and what he says is all good stuff. It's the answer to life. We'll escape all those destructive things by fearing God, by respecting God and listening to him. The children of Israel over and over again said, yeah, you're God, we'll do what you say. And then 2 weeks later, or a month later, a year later, they're going off chasing after some idol or doing something else that's wrong. And they don't respect God. They don't really revere him. And what happens is it brings destruction on themselves. Barb?
Yeah. I mean, here he's giving all these words of wisdom, and he didn't revere God. I mean, he might have at this point, but he was taken away.
Right. Well, that's where this being overly wise, there's no man that was wiser than Solomon ever, but he didn't always exercise wisdom. And so,
I think that's kind of
taught him some of the wisdom that he ended up with, that he could speak to, because he hadn't always been overly wise.
He said, I've seen it all. You know, he's experienced the good and the bad, the righteous and the unrighteous part of it. He's seen it all. So yeah, uh, I don't know at what point in his life he wrote the book of Ecclesiastes, but it could have been at the very end just as easily as that could have been in the middle. Probably it wouldn't be at the beginning because he hadn't experienced anything at the beginning of his life. But it's at least in the latter half of his life that he wrote this, and possibly after he had made a bunch of mistakes. And oh man, why did I get all these women? You know, I collected all these women, from other countries, from other places with all these idols, and they just pestered me to death to where I finally, okay, build your altar, build your shrine or whatever, and just to placate them. Uh, so was it wise to have all those wives? No, it wasn't right, wise or good. He learned that lesson the hard way, I guess you would say. The only way you could expect to learn it was by experiencing it. Bottom line is, I didn't fear God. I didn't consider him. What did God said in his word about taking wives from other nations? Don't do it. He even says, here's why you don't do it. It's because they'll take you away. They'll turn your hearts to idols. And that's exactly what happened. He did not respect God. Yeah. Did he respect God a lot during a lot of his life? Yes, he did, but not in everything. And that the things that he didn't respect God in is what caused him a bunch of trouble, which he experienced and gave him more wisdom. In verse 19, he says, it's good that you should, no, pardon me. Wisdom strengthens the wise more than 10 rulers of the city. You can have 10 rulers in a city, and they may or may not be wise. The rulers in the city are always looking out after, at the very least, after other people besides you, not just you. They're not going to be nearly as good for you as just having wisdom is. That's why it's important to have it. That's why when he wrote Proverbs, he said, this is why I'm writing it, so that you'll have wisdom and knowledge, because it's important for your life. It's better than trying to get advice. What did Rehoboam do? He had 10 advisors, 10 of the lower rulers there that he was asking advice from. And what kind of advice did he get? From the younger ones, they said, you put these people under more stress. You tax them even more. Show them who's boss. Well, they showed him the door. 10 of the tribes hiked it out of there and said, we're not going to follow you. So anyway, all of these other people, even though they were rulers, they were giving him bad advice. Just having wisdom comes from God. Having wisdom will strengthen the wise more than all these other advisors. And he says, here's why. Because there's not a just man on earth who does good and does not sin. I don't care who you try to get advice from. All these rulers that seem to have prospered so much that now they're ruling, like we think about. This guy was smart enough to get to be governor. I'm going to go ask him for advice. Are you going to go ask our governor for advice? No, you're not. And the governor of Oregon, the governor of Colorado, the governor of California, you're going to ask all those for advice, or would you rather just gain wisdom yourself? Yeah. That answers itself. And the reason why is I don't care who you ask for advice. There's not a just man who does good and doesn't, and it means does good only and does not sin. A just man, does he do good? Yes, he does. And that's for the most part. But there are times when he would fall into sin. Everyone does it. Psalm 14:3 is quoted by Paul in Romans 3:10. There is none righteous, no, not one. So both from the Old Testament and the New Testament says that nobody gets through life without sin. Romans 3:23 says, for all have sinned and come short of the glory of God. We all do it. Should we be happy that we do? No. But should we tear ourselves apart because we're not perfect? No, shouldn't do that either. Understand that's just the way it is in life under the sun. That's why you don't get advice from even the smartest guys, the ruler class or whatever, the most prosperous ones. Nobody, you don't want to get advice from those people because they sin as well. And you don't know whether you're going to get good advice or not. Okay, another piece of advice. Also, do not take to heart everything that people say, lest you hear your servant cursing you. And that word cursing, I looked it up, and it means to make light of or to treat with contempt. It doesn't mean swearing at them, you know, swearing at your master behind their back, or no, it just means to make light of or to treat with contempt. You know, you know, servant, come in here. I need this and this and this for breakfast. Go to it. Servant goes out. "Well, I'll give you something, whatever, behind their back. Well, if somebody's bad mouthing you behind your back, should you take it to heart? Why? Yeah. I mean, if you take to heart everything everybody says, it's gonna destroy your self-image, for lack of, at the very least, because there's always going to be people that are going to say stuff. They're going to say stuff behind your back, or they're going to even they're going to just make light of you, to treat you with contempt. It makes you mad when they do that, but the less you let it get to you, the less it affects you, the less it hurts you. This is some really good advice. How many times have we heard reports about bullying? You know, kids telling people that they're worthless and, you know, stuffing them in a locker or something like that. All you have to do is think, who's doing this to me? They're the ones that are stupid, not me. And so people are going to say stuff. Don't take it to heart. Verse 22 says, for many times also your own heart has known that even you have cursed others. Haven't you? Have you not made light of somebody, treated somebody else with contempt? Democrats? When I see some of these senators like Ilhan Omar, it's hard not to think in contempt type terms about her. So even myself says stuff like that, but does it, me thinking evil or thinking badly about somebody, does that really make them that way, or does that really hurt them? I'm only hurting myself if I allow myself to think like that. There's a lot of people out there that maybe deserve the contempt, deserve to be made light of. I just was listening to YouTube can be good, can be bad, but I was listening to some comedians that were talking about the woke everything, and just making light of it. Well, the fact is, these are all people, and it's funny, but it kind of shouldn't be funny. But we do it ourselves, so why would we worry about when somebody else does it? So, sage advice once again. Verse 23, all this I have proved by wisdom. That word proved means tried and tested. When you, well, back in the gold rush days, which none of us lived during, but you see those old cowboy movies, or they say, I got a piece of ore, I want it proved. What do they mean? I want it tested to see how much gold is in there, how much it's worth. That's what he's talking about. He says, I've tried and tested all this by wisdom. Everything I'm telling you, I tried it, I tested it by wisdom. And I said, I will be wise, but it was far from me. As for that which is far off and exceedingly deep, who can find it out? Now, if there was anybody ever on this earth that could find it out, who would it be? It would be Solomon. He was given wisdom above anybody that ever lived before him, everybody that would live after him. But he said, I'll be wise, but it was far from me. The wisest man on earth, how much does he know about everything? If you take all the knowledge is the dirt and you take one grain of sand out, that's the wisest man that ever lived. But how much of everything else is there to know? And he understood that. He said, I've tested it out by all the wisdom I had. Did I figure it out? No, I didn't figure out how to find happiness in this life. It was far from me. As for that which is far off and exceedingly deep, who can find it out? We can't. Even the wisest man couldn't find out everything. Who does know it all? God does. Is that why he says, consider the work of God? Exactly, that's why. The one that has all the answers is God. It's him that we need to go to, him that we need to consider, him that we need to think about. So, times pass. So we're going to have to finish up Ecclesiastes 7 next week. Any quick comments or questions?